So what makes our movement unique, the disability rights movement, is that while our vision of a world where we all belong has changed, how we've understood and expressed what that means in most cases, historically, for those who are labeled as having a disability has evolved and changed, as it should. And it needed to, in order to continue to be effective and have integrity, as we've become aware of, and in some cases been forced to deal with our own internal biases, values and expectations, in how we interpret what a good life in the community is, and how that differs from the persons we may be advocating for. The true value of disability has emerged in our movement as we've adjusted and changed our language, our own attitudes, our approaches, and our notion of what is truly inclusive. In the community living movement and the disability rights movement, that focuses on intellectual disability. And we're changing our language again, by the way. We're at Inclusion BC no longer talking about developmental disability, we're talking about intellectual disability, to be in line with the Canadian and the international language. And because the movement focuses on intellectual disability and where non-traditional communication is the norm, families, friends, and allies are challenged not to be filters for what people want and desire, but true translators, and only when necessary. Where this tension existed and remains today is where we've seen some of the greatest advances and movement in human rights for people with intellectual disabilities. It is where solidarity and unity has been strengthened. And it is where we've come together to hash it out and to work on ourselves, where we've come to terms with our own limitations so we don't limit others. And language has played a big part of that change. And we all know the words, and I'm not going to repeat them. For they, in many cases, have been slurs in every sense, designed to belittle and diminish and dehumanize people through their use. Yet embracing and truly owning the language of disability continues to be essential in getting the message of equality and human rights across. Yet we still struggle, and sometimes it's in the dark, trying to work it out. Trying to pick the next best language, or the next best label, or words. Certainly there is no place for demeaning language we know exists, because it embodies oppression, power over, and control of the person in every way imaginable. Yet we can't seem to come up with something that we can agree on, at least for very long. Something we can own and use for real ethical power, and to advance the power of those who are labeled. I believe the time has come for us to own our language, to stand up and say it proudly, claim our places at the table of citizenship, demanding recognition, reconciliation, and acknowledgement, and command our own conversations about what it means to have a disability, and what it means to be part of a movement with families and allies. We still need each other in this, and it makes sense if we are truly to be together. We all need to come along knowing that advancing rights of one person or group only strengthens the rights of the others. In human rights, it is never a zero-sum game. So let us think about why embracing language is important today. In fact, it has never been more important. Not because of the need to be politically correct, because I don't believe in political correctness. If someone or a group of people say they don't like a label or language to describe who they are, then we simply don't use it. And if we need to remind people about it, and what it is, and what isn't respectful language, then we will do that. It's not about being politically correct, it's about being respectful. Language is critical because it allows us to step out of stereotypes. It says, this is how we will be portrayed. This is who will portray us. It says, people with disabilities have defined who they are as people. It says, this is a line we do not cross. It says, they claim the words and they apply them. But it's also important to put language within the world of today. A world that has not moved as quickly as it should have, or it can. A world that still defaults at times, without even knowing, to charitable, benevolent, sympathetic idea of disability. And it shows up everywhere. And it is never just innocuous or harmless or a matter of political correctness. It is a cultural and social tentacle that is in everything from healthcare, including doctor-assisted death, the loss of capacity in our public schools to support children with special needs, and the erosion of decision-making rights for people with disabilities. It's the fight we're in right now to increase PWD benefits. And it represents a values gap with some of the roots in political correctness, but is nothing more or less than bigotry and ableism. So language can also make people with disabilities more vulnerable. It is time for those who have disabilities to define and claim language as a strength. Language assists in building alliances for strength. It creates opportunities to build common ground. It holds our values, and ironically, it challenges all of us to come forward and move beyond labels. Part of our job is to build and grow on the legacy of those who came before, those who fought for the right to live in the community rather than the brutality of institutions, those who said access to public education is a birthright, those who demand much more of what we have today. Those fearless families and individuals with disabilities gave us our call to action, to share the truth one person at a time if we need to, then with another and another, until the collective voice reaches that tipping point for change. When a groundswell ripples across the entire community, our entire province, and our country. What started at kitchen tables and in church basements more than 60 years ago remains strong today in each of you and in this film festival. But you still need to activate that change in the belief that you are entitled as citizens and as people with disabilities to take your rightful place in your communities, in your schools and universities, in civic life, at work, and in your own homes. It remains the only real way of advancing human rights, and you can never step back or away. This process of movement building is the only thing that has and will bring about the change we know is possible because of what came before us and because of what we know is right.